Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Friday, June 21st. Derek Van Riper, Saris, Trevor May, all here with you. It's a live one. Thanks to the Live Hive for joining us on our YouTube channel. We're live most Fridays at 1 o'clock Eastern. I've been awake too long today, fellas. I have been awake for about 7 hours already, which is
No.
about 3 hours too many before a noon local recording. So I've had time to let a lot of things marinate. I've had time to drink way too much coffee, which could be good for the show, could be a disaster. We're going to find out over the course of the next hour. On today's episode, we'll discuss Thursday night's game at Rickwood Field between the Giants and Cardinals. We'll dig into the 2024 Major League Baseball run environment. People have been asking us about this in the Discord for a little while. What's going on? Is it the ball? Is it something else? We're going to dig into that a little bit more. We're going to go all the way back to 1888 for a split second, too. So we can look forward to that trip in the time machine. Promise we're going to be there for 3 seconds, then we're going to come right back. We're going to dig into some situational stats for pitchers that Trevor was digging up and things that I hadn't really thought about a lot before, but Trevor thinks about them all the time. I think we should bring those to light because they're going to be really fun to discuss, and we'll take some questions along the way as well. So if you got questions, fire away on stream. We'll get to those here in just a little while. Gentlemen, we had a great game on Thursday night at Rickwood Field. I think it delivered in terms of broad expectations that I had, just in terms of learning about history, seeing a beautiful park that I'd never actually seen before, had an entertaining game as well, 6-5 game. So had a little bit of everything across the board. I want to start with you, Trevor. What were some of your takeaways from Thursday night?
So interestingly enough, I was only able to catch a couple pitches of the actual game because of a bunch of random things that kept happening all afternoon. But I was able to catch a lot of the desk, and I had a really good time. A lot of those conversations, I've actually had the pleasure of speaking to Reggie Jackson a bunch of times. He's one of those guys who is maybe one of the better storytellers, I think, of ex-players. And his story about the stuff he had to deal with
was super powerful.
Really, really awesome. The fact that they had like Jeter and A-Rod and Barry Bonds all just sitting together was kind of jarring because I grew up watching those guys like they were the prime. And then I got caught up a little bit in the discourse around Barry Bonds saying he'd take Satchel Paige deep, which was a lot of fun as well. So I'll be honest, that's the rabbit hole I fell into, and then I was in that one for a while. But the Reggie Jackson story was one of my favorite parts about the entire presentation. I'm glad I was able to see that in its entirety.
It's incredibly powerful because I think it's easy for us in the present day to romanticize parts of the past that we are excited about, but to kind of extricate them from the truth, the complete context in which those things happened. So extremely powerful. You could hear it in Reggie's voice. You could see it in his face as he recounted that clip. If you didn't even see the game, that clip was making the rounds on social all night as well. Definitely go back and watch it if you haven't seen it already. How about you? Some takeaways that you had from Thursday?
Yeah, just the emotions. Barry crying about Willie. All the tributes to Willie Mays. You could hear the anger in Reggie Jackson's voice when he told those stories. I thought this was really powerful. Some weird slip ups, like it couldn't help but mention Smoltz mentioning they Americanized the dimensions of the park. What? Did I hear that right? But I just overall I thought it was great. Another weird thing for me was, did you see the light stanchions?
They had the original ones.
Is that the original ones?
So there were two sets of lights.
Those things are going to come down.
The original lights, they took the bulbs out, they said, because they were worried about like a foul ball breaking them. They had to install different lighting for this game.
So I'm talking about the installed lighting, because they had this stuff.
The original lights, yeah.
That was like reaching over that just looked really like rickety. And I was like, some parts of this, like, it's an old stadium. Like that. You also look at the seating behind home plate. Like a lot of it's not flush with home plate. Weirdly, they did a lot of like, if you're sitting, just like 10 feet to the left of home base, like the home plate, you're facing the lines. So there's a lot of people like sort of looking in certain directions. And there were so many people involved in this. And it was such a small park that I was like, I bet you maybe half the people here that are sitting in the stands are actually linked to like events at this and like former players and like, like it looked like it could hold like 5,000 people. It was really small. But I just love the history lesson. Talking to Gleason, who has been a pastor and was a Marine, and then he's out there in the leagues. Like, I thought that was awesome. Like, just to learn so much. I didn't know a lot of those players' names.
Bill Greason, he's the oldest living player to have played in the Negro Leagues, played for the Cardinals, grew up across the street from Martin Luther King Jr., and has been a pastor in Birmingham for 50 years. Like, his life story, it's an incredible life he has lived. He threw out the first pitch.
And he looked pretty good.
Pitch. I mean, just the endless amount of information that you could dig into coming off of a game like this is really exciting, right? There's still going to be great stories coming out of this event, and I think that's more than worth our time. I'm excited for all of
Clinton
that.
Yates had a really good series of pieces called Letters from Birmingham that I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, and I know that Clinton worked with Roy Wood Jr. on an episode of the ESPN Daily podcast earlier this week, previewing this game. They also had another podcast that Roy Wood Jr. was a part of, The Road to Rickwood. I got to go back and listen to that. I didn't know that was out there. That was produced a couple episodes a little while back. So tons of great stuff out there. Just a great night for baseball. I think there was one question sort of at the end of the game people were floating out there was, can we make this an annual tradition? I mean, of course, all for it here. Like, no reservations from me whatsoever. I'd be 100% supportive of this being an annual trip on MLB's schedule.
Yeah, I wonder what the facilities are like for the players. I mean, since it's such an old park. But it looked good from where we were.
Anya in the Live Hive vouching for to listen to Road to Rickwood. I'm guessing it's amazing. Clinton Yates does fantastic work, and the episode of the Daily that I heard was outstanding with those two guys. So yeah, really great event all around on Thursday night, and just a great night for baseball. A lot of people were also hearing Bob Kendrick for the first time. He's the president of the Negro Leagues Museum in Kansas City. I saw the link from Pitching Ninja today. They are taking donations. NLBM.com/donations. It's on the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to drop in there, make a donation if you can, support the great work that Bob and the team do in Kansas City. That's on my list. I've never even been to Kansas City. I'm more excited to go to the museum than I am to go to the ballpark itself. Normally I got to go to the city, got to go to the ballpark, but that's a must stop for me. Hopefully, if not this summer, by next summer, it'll be something I'll get a chance to do. Let's move on to the 2024 MLB Run Environment, a source of frustration for fantasy owners and managers and baseball writers and all sorts of folks out there looking at this. Say, hey, what's going on? What's going on? Is it the ball? Why is run production down? And when you pull back and you just look at what's happening on the field right now, 2024 looks a lot like 2022, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but it's weird because we just had rules implemented last season that were designed to boost offense, right? Specifically, limitations on shifting on the infield were supposed to bring batting averages up, increase hits, do all those things that make people like Trevor very frustrated. And, it hasn't quite played out that way. Like, we're at 4.35 runs per team game. It's the sixth lowest since 2000, but not like off the charts bad. We're just over a home run per team game, similar to 2 years ago. We haven't been under a home run per team game since 2014. So we haven't completely leveled offense, but the slash line is the thing that gets everybody. The league is hitting 241, 311, 391 entering play on Friday. There are 3 seasons on Baseball Reference, 3 ever, where the league average was under 240, 1968, 1888, and 1908.
And you know what 1968 was, right?
That was the mound got raised that year, right?
That was the year of the pitcher, so they raised the mound in 69. So
they raised the mound in 60. Yeah,
that was one of the major rule changes of our time. Happened after that season.
I clicked on 1888 just because I was like, come on, what was going on in 1888? Cap Anson was a 36-year-old who hit 344 that season, and the league's average was still that bad. So I don't know what Cap Anson was doing or eating in 1888.
Different.
But clearly a superhuman relative to his peers at the time based on that production. But what is happening right now? What is happening this year that is causing the run environment to shift right back to our pre-2023 rules? How do we explain this?
I mean,
I have some
Yeah.
theories.
Yeah.
You know, if you'd like to go first, though, I'll pop in.
Well, I'll just throw out what's basically the premise of our article, which is just that there are long-term trends in data analytics pitching. There are long-term trends where basically it's better for run prevention. Like a lot of the things that we've discovered are better for run prevention. And so if you look at something like shifts, outfield shifts have been more effective at reducing batting average to that location than infield shifts ever were. So we didn't do anything about outfield shifts, and we're just getting better and better at outfield shifts. And you see those cards that they have in the outfield, and those are very sort of detailed. Take 3 steps in this direction, take 4 steps in this direction. You know, it's like that positioning is stealing a lot of production to the outfield. Now you have, we showed that Stuff Plus is now perpetrating through the league. And so what you see is the leagues, we forced league average and Stuff Plus to be 100 every year. But if you didn't do that, what you'd see is that stuff was up every year. And so, you know, pitchers are designing their pitches. They're not throwing bad pitches anymore. They're making their bad pitches better. The last wrinkle that we have is that pitches with multiple fastballs now is up 40% over the last 2 years. And 2 years ago, a hitting coach told me pitchers with multiple fastballs is a cheat code. I tried to sit on that. If you've been listening to this pod, you've heard me talk about it a fair amount. And finally, Donnie Ecker said I could out him as the person who did it. So he told me that 2 years ago. And in the last 2 years, pitchers with 3 fastballs up 40%. So, you know, and what that does is a pitcher never has to throw the wrong fastball to the wrong hand. He always has a cutter or a sinker or a four seam. He knows what pitch to throw to what hand. And so basically, as these things have gone, what you see is like when they changed the stolen base rules, you know, we didn't go back to the 70s. We went back to like the early 90s in terms of stolen bases. And so when you see the shift rules, we didn't go back many years. We just sort of stemmed the tide a little bit against this long-term trend, which has been towards run suppression in terms of analytics. That may be changing with some of the bat tracking stuff. There may be some new stuff, but hitters to me generally say, you know, I don't know how much analytics can help me to a certain extent because I have to react and the pitcher is in control. There's certain things like in biomechanics, we've learned that the hip shoulder separation is really big for pitchers for velo, right? And so you could take that to a hitter and say, you need more hip shoulder separation, except the pitcher decides when to release the ball. The hitter can't have such a huge swing to create more bat speed with a huge hip to shoulder separation. What is that? That's a long swing. You know, that has to start going a lot earlier. So that's just one little example, but just generally what we found was that, you know, the ball is only slightly different than it's been in the past. It's basically the same ball that you've had in the last 3 years. And that in terms of drag, and that the trend has just been towards run suppression. And we tried to do 1 year of changes and we stemmed the tide a little bit, but we're just back on that train.
Here we go. Here's the overall idea. You got to remember that baseball players, by their nature, or baseball is, they call it a game of adjustments. You are creating different environments for people whose job it is to adjust to those environments quickly, and so you're going to see guys are going to adjust. We talk a lot about like the player poll came out recently, and everyone says, would our guys from the 80s pitching, or could they pitch now? I think the way I explained this was we are now we have more guys in the league fulfilling their potential. So everyone is in terms of the ceiling of talent, it's probably not changed in a big way. Like the talent was probably very similar.
The very best at the top.
Yeah. But the guys who aren't probably as talented are better. those versions, the middle guys are better than the
that
middle guys
really
were
follows velo. You could just tell that story with velo, right? Like max velo is staying the same, but sitting velo is going up. So you're getting more out of everybody, but the very top is stayed the same.
And then so here's a theory I have. One. So also we need to remember is a year over year, I believe since 2020, strikeout rates are slightly going down. So the ball is being put into play more. That's true. The guy, they're not hits yet. So there is an adjustment a little bit that needs to have. It takes some time for some of this stuff to shake out. And of course, and it's also early in the season. We're just now getting into warm weather, and historically batting averages go up in June anyway. So that's also a factor.
But we were comparing May to May on a lot of this stuff.
May to May.
June
okay.
to June, yeah.
So it is slightly down, and I did check that was, but it's also just, if you're thinking holistically, guys, people at home, just remember that's usually a factor as well. I went to a Mariners game the other day with the where they played the White Sox. You know, these are two not very good hitting teams. And it was, I believe it was Cannon versus Miller. And basically these guys were throwing strike one like crazy. And I had this realization. I was watching like 4 or 5 hitters in a row call their timeout 0-2. So they were 0-2, and it's happening so fast that I was like, oh, they're 0-2 constantly. So I think that getting ahead now, the data I went and looked, and it hasn't shaken out a lot. It's a slightly worse 0-2 counts, but of course there's so many different variables in there. But I think that the clock is now, pitchers are figuring it out enough to where it's starting to level out, and they're getting an advantage from it when they're throwing the ball over the plate.
They're using the clock to kind of go downhill on the pitcher, on the hitter.
They're snowballing on hitters more than they're snowballing on pitchers. Last year, though, the walk rate was 1% up. Right. So it was snowballing on pitchers. Now we're seeing that less and less. People are getting used to it. And now it's snowballing on hitters because, again, they have to react. So if a pitcher feels good, you're in even a deeper hole than you would have been.
Here we go. Boom, boom, boom.
Boom, boom, boom. You're out. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah. And not only that, your defensive swing is happening earlier, faster, because you don't even have enough time to. If you go up and just swing really hard, and then you swing really hard, take 30 seconds, swing really hard, your bat speed is going to be faster the second time. And so there's a little bit of that. So there's a lot of like softly hit ground balls that maybe a guy was trying to juice 0-2, and every once in a while you get a double, and now it's just a roll over to second or short.
There's something in there also about the incentives the ball creates. So the ball in 2019 was the rabbit ball. And what do you do when you have a rabbit ball? You take your A swing every single time. You strike out. It's cool. The next guy's going to try and hit a homer, right? But the more that they deaden the ball, and this is where you're talking about, it might take a little bit of time to filter through, right? But if the ball is deadened, the incentives change a little bit. It's a little bit more like, I may use my A swing a bunch of times and not hit the homer because the ball is not flying as well. And that might lead to lower strikeout rates and may lead us to somewhere that we like in terms of fandom, but it may take a couple years of not looking that great in the meantime.
I think the adjustment is going to take time. I think it is a positive change in terms of, I think the things that they're looking for in terms of how offense is created is actually happening. I think those shifts are happening. It's just going to continue to need a little tweaking.
What did the Mariners say before this offseason? We need to cut strikeouts.
We need to cut the strikeouts.
It didn't work.
We just got to put the ball in play.
It didn't work, but that's what they wanted.
It's getting better, but it's still not great. And then one last thing on the stolen bases. And this is the one thing with the stolen base rule that the people who talk about it and made the decision were in that room when the commissioner's office is working on it. I feel like they have a distinct misunderstanding of how teams make decisions whether or not to steal. And at the end of the day, you are chancing giving an out for one base. And that value proposition, no matter how easy you make it to steal, that will always still be the trade-off. And unless it's automatic, you have to have like a 95% chance to make that valuable. It going from 77% to 81%, it wasn't big enough jump. So don't be surprised. They're like, oh, pickoffs are just banned now. That's like the way. That's what you would have to do in order to get it to a level where teams would be like, this is just, we got to take these free bases. My nephew's little league team, this is hilarious to me, but they run every pitch. They just steal and then.
But they have a lot of rules about it. Like you're not allowed to run before the pitch goes down. You know, like
and when the guy gets back on the mound, so like he throws a pitch, he gets the ball back from the catcher, and he's sprinting to the mound to get there before the kid can take off.
Yeah,
because he knows he can't throw it to second. And when I played, and I was 10, that was like, no, no stealing. That's bad sportsmanship. And now they're just like, get on third,
No,
get on third.
everyone's-
And you need it to be like that in order for it to be like for a big league team to say, we want everyone to steal all the time. You still only have your couple guys that you want to go all the time.
We
Now
had
that is
85% success rates on third base last year, and yet teams weren't really spiking.
Still not doing it. Because it's just if you go through a little bit of you go through a week where you're getting caught every time, you could lose 2 or 3 games because of that. Because
the Nationals have been the most aggressive on stolen bases this year, and they have been running into outs like pretty crazy style the last couple of games. I heard their announcers. I was watching the game yesterday, and their announcers were like, "And they run into another out. That's been happening." And they were like talking about, and I think they lost their game by like a couple. Like the one I was watching, I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before. They lost by like a run or 2. And it was, and I saw them run into like 3 outs, and you're just like, dude, that would have been a base runner. What, you just erased that guy.
And that's what it comes down to. So teams make decisions somehow. Sometimes I think the rules committee doesn't know that, and that's why it hasn't manifested into more runs specifically. But I think it eventually will. It's more. But it's not as much. But again, we talk about all this stuff. I don't know if there is a perfect sweet spot. I don't know when we're going to be like, okay, we're good. I don't know if that even exists either. So it's weird.
Well, with the sitting velo going from 91 to 94, since we've been tracking it, I'm becoming a little bit more open to changing the mound dimensions. I don't know if it's making it, like shorter, like not as tall like they did last time, or pushing it back. But it just does seem like we're running up against the strikeout rate, the velo. We're running up against some tension between the dimensions of our field and the dimensions of our players.
So, there were a couple things that I was starting to think about in the last day or so, especially looking at the old dimensions from Rickwood and watching the catch at the Polo Grounds and thinking maybe we just need to make the parks bigger, because then there'll be more balls in play that the outfield defense can't catch. At a certain point, there's just too much space,
more ground,
or you have to have a lot more athletic guys in the corners. Not to say that all corner outfielders are lacking athleticism, but you need basically 3 center fielders if you made the outfield big enough. So that changes the dynamics of the game a little bit, but then maybe that drags offense down because those guys don't hit as much as your corner guys, right? So there's always this extra effect, the secondary effect that comes from making a change like that. If outfield defense has improved, the positioning of outfielders, and the league already made its rules for where infielders can stand with the changes last year, what are we doing in the outfield if we don't make parks bigger? Because we make parks bigger, we're putting people further away, fans away, further away. That's not what anybody wants. So that's probably not going to happen.
I mean, you're going to throw in these meetings with, that he's talking about, you're going to throw all sorts of ideas around. So I'm sure that at least at some point, the idea has been thrown around that you're going to draw some circles on the field. We know that they were talking about the pie slice, where you basically take the base pass from first and third, and you extend them past second base, and you create like a little sort of a pie slice behind second base. And that they were thinking about, and they tried this in the minor leagues. It's documented that they were thinking about making that a no fly zone for infielders, so that it's not even like right now with the shift rules, they can kind of inch up right next to second base and not be that far from where they were in the past, Right. But with the pie slice rule, they wouldn't be able to do that, and they wouldn't be able to basically stand behind second base by the time the ball's in play. So circles in the outfield, man. I understand how you get to that and why you would discuss it, but I don't want to be. I want to be like forward thinking and be like, yes, let's be like other sports and make drastic changes, and let's have a 4-point line. Like I know basketball is going to consider that. I bet you, but like circles in the outfield will just look so tacky. It's gonna look so bad. I don't know. Like just think of like how when you look out at the outfield, you look out at the field, it looks so beautiful. The green grass, there's limited lines. The lines are in and out, and then inside it's clean and beautiful, and then just have these little circles in the outfield where the
think about the ads though. We could place ads. We could put Quickcrete out
Quick
there.
Crete be out there. Could have
on the Quickcrete logo. Can you imagine? Stephen Vogt is like, a challenge. That outfielder is not on the Quick Creep logo out there. What would you get? Like a strike, a ball, a free runner?
Yeah, what would the yeah, that's funny.
Runner on second.
He gets
automatic
ejected.
double.
Automatic double. He's ejected.
We do need more extreme in-game rules. We need ways to have players eliminated from the game. The red card effect. Everything I want in baseball comes from soccer. Like I want people sent off. Like play the game with 8 defenders.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah.
But we need a yellow card first. Like
Yeah, you need yellow
we need
too.
something that's a yellow card. Like you skip in a bat, you get skipped in the lineup. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Skipped. Oh my god.
Yeah, anything you can do to juice it up, I'm on board. Hilarious too behind the scenes. Our producer Brian said it'll be like MTV Rock and Jock softball. Yeah, I was thinking about that, or NBA Jam Turbo Tournament Edition, where you had the spots on the floor, the hot spots. You could get more points for shooting from the hot spots, and they'd pop up. That'd be cool. So yeah, you've got all these different ways you can try and tweak it, and I'm sure this is something the league spends a lot of time worrying about because it is a product that is supposed to entertain. And if people are not entertained, they're going to keep changing it and changing it and changing it again. It's just after all of the adjustments that just happened, has to be a little frustrating, even though imagine this. Without the changes we had last year, the offensive environment right now could be even more stringent. It could be worse than what we see right now. It could be historically bad instead of like at a lower end of a normal range if we hadn't made the adjustments from last year, and then people would be losing their minds.
Yeah.
But I don't have a problem with it. Like I think you can make small adjustments along the way. I think you watch it and you just keep tweaking along the way. You don't have to be radical about the on-field adjustments. I think you can make those.
Is changing the mound radical?
That's a big adjustment.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't have to do it anymore, so I'm all for it. Let's go for it.
So what would your adjustment be, though? Imagine if you still had to make the changes, what do you think a reasonable mound adjustment would actually be that wouldn't cause unnecessary added risk to pitcher health? Because that's an ongoing concern too.
Honestly, if you just added a couple feet, if you moved it back a couple feet, the interesting thing, yeah, that'll help you hit fastballs, but suddenly it makes breaking balls break more. So
yeah, no more space to break for sure.
And changeups just get better. So it's like,
and we already have a trend in baseball, fewer fastballs.
Yeah. So
like it could turn into the thing where you throw fastballs like you used to throw sliders. You throw fastballs 20% of the time, and you throw all these bendy pitches, and like a nightmare scenario would be move the mound back and do ABS, because then you'd have this machine that's like, you're basically trying to, have you seen like the warehouse games or wiffle ball? When you watch wiffle ball, like
wiffle or blitzball, yeah.
I play blitzball. So. What it would be like that, where you'd be trying to move the pitch so much and just make the machine turn green. Like just catch the tiniest part of that zone. You'd have catchers catching balls on the ground or like 2 feet out of the strike zone, but they nipped it, on the way. So it'd be a lot of frisbees, and that could be kind of a nightmare scenario too. What we've seen with ABS is
shrinking the zone is probably your best solution to help hitters. Shrinking the zone, which is just sounds so awful. Well, it's kind of what they're doing in AAA. It's smaller. The ABS is smaller. No one said anything officially about that.
That's why the walks are up, huh?
Yeah. It's like the top of the zone's 2 inches lower. 2 inches. Like I got to the point where I've thrown it and they're like, "Hey, do you want to challenge?" I'm like, "I don't know where the strike zone is. I don't know how big it is. So I don't know. You tell me. I've been here for 1 day. It looks like a big league strike, but it's not a minor league strike." And
yeah, you look at Jared Jones, how much he struggled against ABS, and he comes up and he's shoving.
Yeah, it's not crazy. It's just a hard adjustment. Like people can adjust. It's just going to take some time, and that sucks. But yeah, I think shrinking the strike zone is probably your only surefire way to really benefit hitters, because they can stand there. When in doubt, stand there. Right.
Yeah, but that also does not make the product.
Does make it more exciting though. Yeah. So they would have to make an
don't want to
adjustment
increase walks. I do not think that anybody likes to watch a walk.
So I don't know if there is a way. Maybe it's a combination.
Yeah. Walks need to be more exciting somehow. Banana Ball made a run at it.
You can run as long as everyone has to touch the ball.
Yep. And even watching them do that is actually fun to watch, because if it's well orchestrated, if everyone moves and does what they're supposed to do, they can get the ball around pretty quickly.
My buddy Louis Paulus, who used to work for the Phillies, had an idea that hit by pitches should be more penalized. So more bases, hit by pitches could be
a double.
Could be a double. And the general long-term thinking is that you would be prioritizing command over stuff a little bit. Maybe you'd be incentivizing command over stuff by penalizing hit by pitches more. One of his ideas was immediate ejection.
Guys would definitely be leaning into pitches or not getting out of the way of pitches more often. If
that too, with the armor,
no throw it in ever again.
Right, with the and then with the elbow armor, you wouldn't just be like, I'm standing on top of the damn plate like Anthony Rizzo, and I have my hand, I'm gonna have my armor on, and I'm gonna get you ejected out of this game.
Like when Conforto got hit with that strike and won the game in 2021.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah, see, it happens. Let's move on to some situational stats for pitchers. Trevor went down a few rabbit holes recently, and one thing that I had not thought a lot about is what types of pitchers battle back most often going down 3-0 in a count. And what does that say about mindset, right? Like, Trevor, what got you to start digging into this again? Because it's one of those things where, I just think about, oh, you're down 3-0, you're probably screwed. I don't think about how often some pitchers get back out of that situation and how often others completely cave.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like there's so many mindset dynamics from a hitter and a pitcher. And when you're thinking about playing the game that way, like, what is this guy intending to do, or what is he thinking right now? If you're good at figuring that out and knowing where you're at, that's a pretty holistic understanding of like what's happening right now and then how to be successful in it. Like you can take it's like social engineering to its finest. So I was like, what? Why did I've always thought when I was 3-0, I'm like, you're not going to first for free. Like you're at least going to have to see some strikes and figure that out first. You're going to have to do something. I'm not letting you go for free, because 4-0 is just for free. Like you didn't have to do anything. I had 4.5 walks per 9 in the minors, and I adopted a mindset and started to get better. And then I walked 7 in my debut in the big leagues. I was like, you know what? I'm going to take this mindset because that's one thing I have full control over. And then it just kind of stayed with me as a reliever. And historically, I had really good stats against guys 3-2 because of that. Like they had to go from kind of checked out to back in the at bat. And that's not easy to do. And they're reacting to us.
You're forcing them to change their mindset in a way. Because they're like, making them this guy can't throw a strike. I'm gonna stay. I'm not gonna swing really. And then
they're like, locked in to maybe checked out to back locked in. So you have an advantage there if you're always locked in. So I was like, okay, who? And then I watched Edwin Diaz, and Edwin Diaz was a guy. I was like, he goes 3-0, and he's just like, I don't. Next. It's not worth wasting the pitches here. That's a different mindset. Still valid in some ways, but I would never be okay with throwing. I'll throw more pitches and not give up runners and vice versa. But he struck out 2 of every 3 guys he faced. So like that's a little bit of a different situation. So it's like, who does this the best and who doesn't? And what I looked at was 3-0 counts whether the next pitch. Okay, so I got the shout out to the guys at True Media who put this together for me, because I don't know how they made these stats, but they filtered them perfectly for me, where it shows your total 3-0 counts over a certain amount of time for the guys, and then what percentage of those went 4-0, where they walk 4-pitch walk, and then what percentage of those did they get back to 3-2 before whatever happened. They might still walk them, but it didn't just happen, right? So they buckled down. I just called it buckled down. And I just did one for a minimum of 100 innings. So there's some relievers in here over the last 5 years. Since 2019, I feel like that's a good line. And the guy with the highest 4-pitch walk, he didn't go 3-0 a lot, but when he did, Sean Doolittle went 3-0 14 times and a 4-pitch walk 10 times. So and he threw 90% fastball. So if you think about him, he didn't go 3-0 a lot, but when he did, he was he was just erratic because he's only throwing his fastball. So like that probably was mechanical.
It was probably also mental. Like a given thing where he's like, I'm not gonna go middle with my fastball.
I only have 1 pitch. He knows what's coming no matter what.
It needs to be high in the zone.
He can't afford to just lay fastballs over. And after talking to him a couple times, that tracks. He just definitely he thought that he was smart with that because he's like, I have one good pitch, but I know that I have to be smart about it.
Yeah.
Mark Melancon, 67% of his. He had a little bit more, 33 4-pitch or 3-0s, and 22 of them 4-pitch walks. Closer. Now there's an interesting thing. Closers do this more than like firemen 8th inning guys.
Probably because you come into an empty base pass situation.
You're always like, in with nobody.
I can create one base runner or two, or maybe, but like I can definitely walk one guy if I'm gonna, get out of this. It'd be okay.
Pete Fairbanks is on here. He's tied in second, 67% of the time, 26-39. And the interesting thing is the inverse of this, they go 3-2. He only goes 3-2 13% of the time. And so you get to ask these questions like, why? Like, I
wonder if there's sometimes maybe also an interaction between the pitcher and the umpire where he wants to throw it in a certain place and he's just not getting the calls. Because Melancon's not that similar to the rest of the guys, except that he like threw a cutter a lot. And if he just wasn't getting one corner or one area of the strike zone, and he was like, I'm just going to keep throwing it there because that's where I throw my pitch. And if I'm not getting calls on strikes, then this is going to be a bad day.
Now I kind of want to go look at like Houston Street. Same thing.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm just going to keep doing the thing. I'm not trying. Like, I'm just going to keep trying to throw it there. And if it's not called strike today, then it's walks. One interesting one though, if you go look at guys who are good at it, guy right now who is good at it, Griffin Jacks. He's 3-0. He's 3-0 21% of the time, but he gets back to 3-0 42% of the time. So he's a fireman guy who might throw 1+ innings, and he'll come in the 7th or 8th inning. And
there will be people on base sometimes. Yeah, exactly.
So he can't afford to just go walk a guy in 4 pitches. He has to find a way out, even if it costs him 30 pitches.
He can't make it first and second with 1 out, or or bases loaded. Like he needs to keep pushing it. Yeah.
So there's a lot of those.
He also has good breaking balls he can throw in the zone.
Exactly.
Which I think he has some other names like
Griffin's job. Guys who do Griffin's job on other teams tend to have really good breaking balls and tend to do those same things well. And then you have to have that mindset combined with the stuff. And that's why he's had so much success in the last few years, is because I think he knows what I'm talking about, whether or not he's consciously thought it or not. He has to have that mindset. Closers don't. And it was just really interesting to notice, because you can see closers get kind of comfortable in that way, and then when they're put in situations where they have to go do the other thing, i.e. Ryan Presley,
playoffs, or they're
moved into the 8th inning role, and suddenly it's way different. This is one of the ways that manifests it. It's different, which was really eye-opening. I didn't anticipate it being this clear on like how high, like Emmanuel Clase, 59% of his,
which is funny because he doesn't walk people. He doesn't have bad command,
but when he does, he walks them 4 pitches.
And he's just like, fine, whatever, next.
And
I'm going to throw the next guy 98-mile-an-hour cutter. He's going to pound it in the ground. I got a double play done.
Yep.
It's really interesting too, though, the difference even between Clase and Edwin Diaz, both very good closers for recent years. Like Diaz misses so many more bats. Like he can reliably strike the next guy out at a much higher level. With Clase, it's like, hey man, like you're tough to hit, but it's not a 0. It's not 40 or 50% K rates. It's not absurd. It's mid to high 20s most years from Clase. Last year was on 21.2%. So it's like not quite fully being on board with how dominant you are. But if you don't end up in those situations that often, I get it. Also, Emmanuel Clase doesn't give up homers.
Yeah, it's a 60% ground ball rate.
Yeah, he doesn't give up homers. So I think that's the other part of it. Is like, that's all right. Runner on first, no big deal. I'll get a ground ball. That's probably the other huge part of it for him versus Diaz that makes his mindset and approach a little different.
A couple other quick ones just to know that are over 50% in the last 5 years. We got Jose Leclerc, David Bednar, Kenley Jensen, like all of them.
Yeah.
Jake McGee, like Gregory Soto. They're all over 50. They've all closed.
That's funny.
It is crazy.
I wonder if it's
crazy. It's a lot of them.
Here's an idea. Pitchers have A swings and B swings and C swings. So pitchers have like their money maker. They have their pitches ranked in their head, right? And even sort of pitch and location. Like Doolittle's low fastball is not rated highly, even in his own head, right? So he's like, number 1, high fastball. Number 2, slider on the corner or whatever. you have these things rated. Those are your A swings, your B swings, your C swings. The closer is just like, I'm going to take my A swing over and over again. And I feel like maybe the middle reliever mentality is more like, hey, sometimes I need to throw my third pitch because I need to get it in the zone, or you know what I mean? Like it's a little bit more of a wide variety of pitches, maybe not the same strikeout rate, maybe not the same level of dominance, but more of a like battling mentality. And maybe I throw my third best pitch here because I need a strike. I need to steal a strike. I need to get back in this, as opposed to the closer being like, you're never going to see my third best pitch.
Yeah.
I'm never going to use it.
Closer also know this. This is a thought that closers have, and I can attest to this last year. I cannot give up a homer.
Yeah.
Guys in the seventh inning are like, I don't want to, but if I do, at least we'll hit again. And maybe make up for that idea. So like,
and a walk
really
could be pretty
homers.
bad for me in this situation where I already have a base runner, you know?
Yeah. And they have 1-run leads a lot. So Doolittle's out there like, I can't give up a solo shot, even if it's 3-1. So I'm going to try to get him to swing at a pitch on the edge. I have to. And so sometimes it just turns into a walk.
Trevor, did you spot anything in the starters in these situations that stood out, like guys that are aces that have excellent stuff being more willing to go to the next hitter, or anything along those lines?
One thing was interesting, and I'm going to pull this up really quickly once again because I'm going by innings pitched here. So I'll go to 250. So that'll pretty much take it down to 300. 300 innings over the last 5 years. I think that's a pretty good. There might be a couple relievers in here, but the number one guy was Charlie Morton, which was really interesting because we think of Charlie Morton having good command. And I think this is probably most of the last couple of years. But again, we've switched to breaking balls all the time, and he'll throw his curveball 3-0. He'll do it because he's another guy who, his movement's crazy, and he knows what his best pitches are, and he's gotten away from the sinker like he used to throw when he was with the Pirates, and he throws four seams. So again, it's like avoiding that home run, like avoiding, just like the hitters are going for damage. Now pitchers are thinking, I need to avoid damage, even if it means a walk. That's still better than a triple or a homer. And that those are the decisions being made. Really interesting here is like I got Josiah Gray is up here 46%, Zach Littell's 46%, but they also have kind of high, like Littell's 37% 3-2. So that just might be he does both. It's one or the other, which is interesting. I don't really know what's going on there. That could
with
be
Morton, I see a little bit of that smaller arsenal. Like right now, he doesn't have a great fastball to use against. He's like kind of become more of a sinker guy. And so he doesn't have a really great fastball to use in lefties. His walk rate is twice as high against lefties. So with a starter, you might have some of this like, this is Juan Soto, and I don't really have a great fastball to throw Juan Soto. I'm a righty trying to pitch to Juan Soto. Maybe I just give him the walk because I don't want to give up the homer, and I don't want to give in and throw him my second best fastball or whatever. It is part of the proliferation of multiple fastballs can help you out of this, because how do you climb back in a count, give them a fastball that you can command, but not the fastball they expect.
Yeah, it's a wrinkle. Like if you throw a seam shifted 2-seam and a 4-seam, you can throw the seam shifted 2-seam 3-0 or 2-0 as opposed to the 4-seam, and that's also probably might be hit on the ground. So the highest, honestly, in the last 3 years for starters, 47%, Charlie Morton. So these numbers are much lower than relievers in general. That's the highest. And there's a bunch of 20s and 30s and 40s percentage here on the with these same guys at the top, 3-0 to 3-2, which tells me for starters, it's it's way more situational.
Matchup so specific.
They're picking their spots, and they know
we've got 2 outs. Soto's up. I'm just going to put him on first and go against Stanton or whatever.
Yeah, and they pitch around guys a lot more than relievers do. We just go like this.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there is like the managing your own workload, your stamina, and avoiding damage simultaneously. I think that's a bigger part of the equation. And I think it is something matchup specific, could even be handedness when you're giving up the platoon advantage. If you don't have that pitch you need, then maybe you're more willing to give in that circumstance. And if you're Zach Littell facing a righty, maybe you're less likely to give in and continue working the count as much as you can because you think you can battle back in that situation. So yeah,
like,
a lot of different
angles. Can I throw my
here.
slider for a strike in a 2 or 3-0 count? Yes. Where does that slider for a strike go? Does that slider for a strike work against lefties from a righty? Maybe not. Maybe I don't want to throw that slider for a strike. That might be right in their happy zone.
So here's one for you. This is a related concept in a lot of ways, at least in ways of thinking about what's happening with guys on base. Why should we care about inherited runners, Trevor?
I love this one. This is I always tell this joke to especially new guys in the bullpen. I go look up like they were a new guy from another team who's been in the big leagues for a while, or we talk about guys pitching, and I'd be like, I was always interested in how well they handle inherited runners, meaning how many guys are on base when you come in the game, and then bequeathed runners, how many do you leave on base when you leave the game and someone else comes in after you? How much of those score? And basically, I always have a standard that if you give up more inherited runners than other guys are giving up your bequeathed runners, then you're a bad teammate. And that was just a joke. I look it up, be like, yeah, you're a bad teammate. And I just say it to the guys and we joke about it, whatever. But there is something to it. When you go in and the guys on base aren't yours. So if they score, it's not going to be your ERA. There's guys that just don't really care that much about it. And that sounds like mean, but it's true. They have enough worry on their mind. They're worried about getting their job done and
their own
thing. And if you're on a bad team, that happens. And so it comes down to like, how well do you go in and strand the runners that you inherited? And you want someone who comes in behind you to do your bequeath. So to like do a good job of taking care of your bequeath runners. So if you're like the 8th inning guy and you go out and you give up a runner, but they bring in the closer, you're like, good, the closer's coming in. So the chances that guy on second stays there are high. But if you're the starter, we talked about this when we were going to the show. Like you give up 7 in 5 innings, and then you're going out in the 6th, and you give up 2 runners. They bring in the guy they're bringing in. You're down 7-2. The guy you're bringing in is probably not great at leaving guys out there. he's probably a starter that's just like, I don't know what I'm doing.
But if you're a slightly better starter that pitches to an even game, then you get the A bullpen.
You get the A bullpen, and that's a big thing. And that's something to pay attention to. That's why. Remember Paul Skeens' debut, and he gave up 1 run, but 2 of his bequeath scored, and was like, well, he gave up 3 runs in 4 1/3 innings. I'm like, he didn't give up those 2. The guy came in who threw 16 straight balls did. So it's like, and how do you keep that? So as relievers, this hurts relievers a lot, and this is always something that's so interesting to me. If you have like one day where you come out of a game with 2 outs, the bases were loaded, and you were down by a run or whatever, it's just not a great day. Guy comes in behind you, gives all 3 of your runs up. That can fundamentally change how your statistics, or at least your ERA and like how many runs you've given up on the year, a lot. It could add, if you have 45, 50 innings, that could add like almost a full run. So it's like, you always have to asterisk these things when you're a reliever and be like, well, actually, if my buddy would have just thrown a fastball there, I would have had a 2.9, but now I have a 3.6. So,
yeah.
And no one cares about that. And that's one of the crappy parts about being a reliever. But when I look at relievers, if they're really good at leaving inherited runners out there, that's one indicator I look at for a guy who can throw in leverage that I don't think anyone looks at. It's something that I would notice if I were if I were thinking about picking up a guy in a trade who maybe hasn't been used that well. Danny Colum was a guy who I think he's inherited 13 guys this year and let 0 of them score. I want that guy going out there with guys on base.
Great
teammate. He's good at it, and he does it on purpose.
Yeah, it is a funny thing because in the one way this gets paid attention to, I think, in fantasy and in analytics is left on base percentage for mostly for starting pitchers. I haven't seen a lot of people think about it because mostly in fantasy they only care about the closer.
Right, the middle relievers and leverage
mostly
guys.
Mostly everywhere they only care about the closer. Everyone only cares about the closer.
Well, but there's a way around this that I've wondered about for a long time, and it's the way games are scored. But should inherited runners fully count against the pitcher who they reached base against, or should they be divided based on which base they reached, right? So if you leave the game and the runner was on second base, and then I come in and I let the run score, maybe we should each take half of that run. If that runner was on first, you take a quarter, I take 3/4 of a run. Like it should maybe be accounted properly to each pitcher involved. That would change a lot. Maybe in arbitration in some cases, a handful of cases, but it would change a lot in perception. Like we know ERA isn't a big deal in advanced stats communities, but it's plastered all over the stadium. So the people shredding relievers on Twitter are probably still caring about ERA. So maybe it would just be a little better if we made ERA a little more accurate because people are still mindful of it in the mainstream for sure.
I also was thinking about this idea that Trevor was talking about, that like if you're not that great of a pitcher and then you are handing the ball to the B bullpen, then maybe your strand percentage won't regress to the same places as others.
Mhm.
So another way of saying this is the left on base percentage, LOB on Fangraphs across the league is like 71 or 72 every year. And so you can go and you can see that Ryan Feltner has allowed 57%, 57% of the people that he's had on base. He's so 43% have scored. And normally it's 29. So you're like, oh, wow, he's been really unlucky. Well, you know, there's a Colorado action there. There's another guy on here, Patrick Corbin, that left on base would say he's been unlucky. Well, he has a 6.6 expected ERA. So he's not keeping he's 1-7 on the record. So he's not keeping his team in games, and he's not getting the good reliever when he leaves the game. He's not getting, I forget who it is. Like, he's not getting Hunter Harvey.
No, he's not getting to that branch of the bullpen. He's definitely getting the B relievers. And by the way, I was going to write about this for the recap this week. The Nationals really do have something cooking with pitching. They have exceeded projection with several pitchers this year by K-BB,
Sean
by ERA.
Doolittle, what up?
There's something going on there. So Doolittle and the organization, like, they've got something working. It's Mackenzie Gore. We knew Mackenzie Gore could be really good, but I don't think we had expectations he would exceed by this much this year. It's Finnegan, it's Harvey in the bullpen, it's Jake Irvin, it was Trevor Williams before he got hurt. I mean, they've had a whole bunch of guys come up with little fanfare. Now DJ Hers is up. Kind of curious where that goes. So not a place I've traditionally looked at and said, their pitchers might be better than expected. They also are one of those teams that, if you look at BABIP on the rolling 1-year leaderboard, they are near the bottom. They're bad. Their defense has not done their pitchers
Outs
any
above
favors.
average says they're the 25th best defensive team.
Right. So for them to be exceeding projections on the pitching side is even more difficult because their defense is bad.
Yeah. Just to finish my thought on left on base real quick, Pablo Lopez, second worst left on base percentage. He's a good pitcher. I know his ERA is high, but something like his xERA is 3.5. And I would generally think that Minnesota has a good bullpen.
Yeah.
So
they have a deep bullpen. Even their B guys are pretty good.
Yeah. So I think that, there's something to this, like, thinking a little bit harder about strand rate and not necessarily just, saying, oh, Corbin's going to be better because of this. But if you're looking at Cease or Pablo Lopez, even Kevin Gossman, part of what's happened is just some of the relievers probably have let in some of their runs and made it look worse than it should be.
Yeah, it's not helping. I have one prime example that this is the first time I ever thought about this. And this happened in 2015. I'm about to drop a name. This is a deep cut. Blaine Boyer.
Whoa.
Yeah, Blaine Boyer.
Speaking of Twins bullpens. So in 2015, he was 3-6 with a 2.5 ERA and 68 appearances. By all accounts, good year. But then if you dig a little bit, he struck out 33 in 65 innings. That's not ideal.
No,
that's not many.
And he allowed 18 runs of his own runs. How many inherited runners did he allow to score? Also, 18. 18 of 38 he allowed to score, and 5 of his 22 bequeathed scored. So I'm like,
whoa, so the 18, he's with the bad team you're talking about a little bit. I mean, we're being facetious,
and
like,
which is hilarious.
We're not saying he's actually bad.
Blaine Boyer's the nicest, like most honest and genuine person. He is the best teammate I've ever had.
But he put 18 runs on other people's.
As soon as he takes that mound, bad teammate. And he just couldn't miss any bats, obviously. So, but he would always get out of it when his runs were on second. But if there's someone else's, they scored every single time. So we kind of had a running joke going about it, and he was always really good with it. But because he inherited 38 guys in 1 year, that's a lot. So he was the guy. He was that guy you're talking about. He would come in the 6th. And he would
probably when they were losing
or tied. Yeah, like it was close, but we weren't winning.
I know this is hard to fix on the fly, but what were teams expecting from Blaine Boyer exactly? Like, he had a great ground ball rate for most of the first half of his career.
Probably they thought they were getting grounders.
They thought that was coming back, and it just didn't.
Andrew Kashner, he's just Andrew Kashner's twin brother. They looked exactly the same.
Oh,
too. Big beards and heavy sinker, bowling ball sinkers. And he threw 96, 97 in his prime. Like, he threw really hard. So you think you could parlay that, but it just never manifested into strikeouts. His strikeout rate was, he struck out 292 guys in 470 innings.
I wonder what he would look like in the age of pitch design.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering if that's what it was.
Done.
Like, if there was just something, he was just a little ahead of his time in terms of when his ability would have been maximized, because there was enough there for teams to keep bringing him back, wanting him to have a job. But
I mean, he threw an 87-mile-an-hour slider. Like, that was a pretty good pitch.
He could stuff. By all accounts, eye test, he looked like he had good stuff. It just didn't turn into misses, per se.
There you go. Well, I didn't think Blaine Boyer was going to pop up on the show today. So Cap Anson to Blaine Boyer, a complete history of baseball just in one hour. How'd we do it? A couple other things here. One other question I had that kind of ties a couple topics together is, how much are relievers going to have to adapt to the current stolen base environment? Because I think when I watch games, it seems like teams start to run even more when relievers get into the game.
And certain relievers.
And certain relievers have a clear, like, there's the word has gotten out, like, you can run on these guys. So if there's like a max effort, slow to the plate, but that's how you get your stuff to be nasty sort of approach, how long will it take for relievers to also add some element of being quicker to the plate to their overall profile and to eliminate that weakness?
It may already be happening. I had Stats Perform check this out. And one thing that was interesting is that starters give up more stolen bases in a given season. That's mostly because they pitch more innings, but we've actually come to almost an equilibrium between starter and reliever innings. I think it actually has something to do with leverage index. So I think that most often you want to steal when it's not necessarily the game on the line. You steal when you're trying to put up crooked numbers. You steal when you're trying to add scoring at the beginning. You don't always want to steal if you need one run and you've got your bopper at the plate and it's the 8th inning. You know what I mean? Like, that's not. So I think there's more situational moments early in the game where you can steal versus late. I think that's part of it. But what we've also found is that starters are better at suppressing stolen bases. So, they've always had a better stolen base success rate than relievers in the sample that I was looking at. And it's usually, like 20 to 30 points, as much as 50 points. But in 2023, with the new rules, base runners were 84% against relievers. They were successful 84% of the time, and 77 against starters. It was one of the biggest. It was the biggest difference in my thing. This year, 81% against relievers, 77% against starters. So already, either teams are saying, I'm not sure I want to give this reliever who can't control the running game that many opportunities, in this new environment. Or relievers have already started to make the adjustment of being like, I have to bear down and think about this and spend some time in the offseason figuring out my move to second, my move to first.
Yeah, interesting that we're already seeing a little bit of a shift there, but we'll see. We'll see what the rest of the season brings in that regard.
I mean, our man Ottavino, who came on here, a friend of the podcast, is it's kind of off to the track races.
I'm looking at it right now. I was going to use him as my benchmark. He's only 6 out of 7 this year. It's not. He's at a lower pace than usual. It's been 22, 19, and 22 last 3 years. How many stolen bases he give up?
Oh.
I mean, you try to think about throwing out a runner when he's throwing that sweeper, though. Like, what? How are you going to get a throw off? You can't.
That he'll be the first one to tell you. He's like, you just don't. You got it. You just got to guess that I'm not going to throw the sinker up on accident or something.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Got a question here from the Live Hive. This is a pitch design question. Don't know if we have an answer to it, but I think it's worth throwing out there. This one's from Lars. Was reading about Bob Feller versus Satchel Paige before Rickwood. What was the fuzz on Bob Feller's fastball? Insane arm side run?
I mean, they said it was velo, and You know, I think the best calculation I've seen was that when Bob Feller threw the ball and they had they timed it and they had the motorcycle going and everything. The best math I've seen, I think, on that suggested that pitch went 98. So I think Feller was a really hard thrower.
Yeah. Velo, and one thing Bob Feller did, and this was kind of the mechanical way they taught mechanics too. Pretty much everyone was a Tom Seaver type drop and drive guy. So extension, everyone had they thought extension meant hard throwing. You had to have extension to do it. So guys were just like jumping down the mound, scraping their back leg on the ground. So like they were releasing the ball really low, and he felt like they were closer to you. So that gives you like perceived. Guys say it looks harder than it is. He definitely had that too, and he threw hard. So he had both of those things. That's why he was anecdotally. That's why I think he was so dominant, because he had both.
Page is really hard because I don't think that we'd ever did these like sort of let's try to see how hard he throws. I've seen fastball, I've seen facing Nolan. Like I haven't seen like a thing on Satchel Paige, but I do know that my kid plays Satchel Paige in MLB The Show, and they gave him 100-mile-an-hour sitting fastball. So that was the kind of like Willie Mays told a story that he got a single the first time he faced Paige off of a slider. And he heard Paige muttering something about being a boy because I think Mays must have been like literally like 16 or something. And then the next time he comes up, Satchel Paige says, "Boy, I'm going to throw you 3 fastballs and you're going to sit back down." And Willie Mays is like, "He's going to tell me what's happening." And then he threw 3 fastballs and Willie Mays sat back down and struck out. So,
stories.
So I think that Paige was a really hard thrower. What we saw in MLB was the end of his career. He was the oldest debut at 41, I think. And he played again. He actually went away for a little bit because he lost his velo completely. His arm was dead. And then he came back and pitched a little bit 59. So he's the oldest pitcher to pitch in baseball too, when some of the velo came back. But we don't know how hard he threw, but I would assume that part of Satchel Paige was how hard he threw.
Yeah. I also wonder too how many of those guys had ride, and it was just something people didn't think about. It was just hey, this is a good fastball, right? But it wasn't described the way we describe it now.
And ride is funny too versus sink. If you throw a good sinker, like I think you can see it easier as a pitcher, and I think that the coach can see it easier because it like really is like,
Yeah.
And then so I think for a long time when we weren't using the machines, it was like throw that thing. That looks nasty, the Greg Maddux
sinker is nastier than the thing that doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Straight fastball is now called ride.
Yeah, exactly. So I would guess a lot of those guys back in the day threw sinkers.
Yeah, I think keeping the ball on the ground was very, very popular for a long time in baseball. I think that was a big part of it. You want it on the ground, nothing bad can happen. They made hitters trying to hit the ball on the ground too, which kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
We are going to go on our way out the door. Just a couple of quick reminders. You can find us on Twitter. Trevor is at I am Trevor May. Eno is at Eno Saris. I am at Derek Van Riper. The pod is at Rates and Barrels. If you want to join our Discord, the link is in the show description. If you got a question for a future episode, send them through Discord or drop us an email, ratesandbarrels@gmail.com. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to smash the like button on this video or leave us a nice rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great weekend, everybody. We're back with you on Monday.
Thanks for listening.